Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Unatu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvrina Tamastu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And welcome back to our Friday evening classes after our summer break. And we are starting with this book, this season, Religion and Its Practice. We're going to start with the third lecture, which is about by Swami Saradananda. Swami Saradananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. All these were written by direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And he was the first secretary of the order. When Swami Brahmananda passed away, they offered him the president's role, and he said, no, Swami Vivekananda put me in this role, and I'm going to stick to it. So he remained that, and he's also responsible for building the Udbodhan house in Calcutta, where Holy Mother stayed when she visited Calcutta, and also the writing of the Great Master. So if you've read the Great Master, that's his creation. He wrote that in a little tiny office in the downstairs of the Udbodhan building, and Holy Mother lived upstairs. So he's sometimes known as Holy Mother's gatekeeper. So you had to get past Swami Saradananda to see Holy Mother. All right, so this particular chapter is called The Spiritual Aspirant and Spiritual Practices. So Atma's going to read for us, and then we'll make some comments.
If we want to be spiritual, we must first have a clear conception of what is sadhana, or spiritual practice. Wrong notions of spiritual life prevail among people. It is seen that most of the so-called spiritual men of the day, in their zeal to attain something supernatural, take recourse to certain kinds of practices that are neither conducive to the spiritual growth of men nor are healthy to life, and thus, forgetting the ideal, they cut themselves off from the string of real life. Some are so self-deluded as to think that spiritual life consists in the observances of certain external ceremonials and local customs, the charas, coupled with physical austerities. Sometimes even mystery-mongering passes for real spirituality. Again, the practices that have been enjoined by the sages upon particular individuals to free themselves from their respective evil habits and tendencies, they are often preached universally as real sadhana, to be practiced by all. There are people, again, who ruin themselves by pursuing the mistaken idea that they can bring God under control to serve their selfish ends of sensuality by the powers of mantras or some kinds of practices, even as the snake is charmed by incantations. So it will not be out of place to give here some truths about real spirituality, as discovered by the great saints and sages of India after their lifelong struggle and strenuous sadhana.
And we should probably point out that Swami Saradananda also spent a few years preaching in the U.S. and England, right around the turn of the previous century. So he had experience with Westerners and Western religions and how they were practiced over there. And so you can see some hints of his ideas about practices in the Western countries as well as in his own country of India. And certainly we are familiar with this problem where people think that religion is simply having a set of beliefs. It isn't about practices. It's just you believe this, 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 and this, and it makes you a thus and so, and that's being spiritual. and it kind of ends there. And then somehow there's not a list of things you're supposed to do about these beliefs. And then also at this time that he was preaching over here, spiritualism had become very popular, and that's because the current scientific discoveries had shed some doubts on the authenticity of the Bible. Literary criticism came into view, and the scientific discoveries showed that the earth couldn't possibly be only 6,000 years old and things like that. So they wanted some sort of experiential religion, and so they turned to spiritualism, table tipping and Ouija boards and seances and that type of thing, in order to get some idea that there is some sort of reality to the afterlife. But that was also what attracted people to the lectures of Swami Vivekananda, Vedanta, and Saradananda, and the other early Swamis that came over to America. As they were searching for something other than just a set of beliefs, they wanted something to do about it, and they didn't want to get into spooky stuff. And so the idea of Raja Yoga, an actual practice, and all the 4 yogas was very appealing. All right, so let's continue.
Sri Ramakrishna used to say, to see God in all is the last word on spirituality. And indeed, this blessed vision dawns when man reaches the climax of sadhana. The Hindu Shastras, the scriptures, also testify to this. They say all is Brahman. All the various objects, gross or subtle, conscious or unconscious, men, animals, birds, trees, plants, all that you see in this universe are but that one individual Brahman. That Brahman alone you sense in various forms and in diverse ways, though all the time you live and move in him and hold your life's daily dealings only with him. Yet you're not aware of it, and you think you are doing so with different people and diverse objects. But why is this not realized? You cannot realize the truth as you are in the midst of error. So long as the mist is not cleared away, the mistake cannot be found out. Error is detected only when it is compared with truth.
Yeah, this is one of the great things that we can strive to do, is to try to see Brahman in every action, in every being. And that's what we begin our meals with. You know, if Brahman is the ritual, Brahman is the offering, Brahman is the one who offers to the fire of Brahman. And if you see Brahman in every action, you will find Brahman. So that's one of the main sadhanas, you could say, that we would like to do. And we remind ourselves of that before each meal, reminding us that that Brahman is in the food, and we're going to consume the food. The energy of the food is going to become part of us. We're going to be doing actions, and that action is action of Brahman. Brahman is acting through us. And it starts way back at the sun. And if you want to get scientific about it, you can think that, you know, Shankara said this universe is a misperception of the reality, and the reality is really undivided. And the force of gravity is that undividedness showing through, because everything wants to fall back together by gravity. So we see hydrogen and helium falling together by gravity, and they form stars, and the stars get hot and they shine, and the sunshine falls on the planets, and then the plants take in the sunshine and convert raw materials into sugars, and then the sugars get eaten by the animals, and then the animals run around on it. So you've got going from gravity, which is Brahman, the Brahman seen through the physics of the universe, you could say, the oneness of the universe showing through in the way the universe works, and then through that it comes out as us doing action. So the idea is also to see yourself not as the doer, but to see that God is always the doer. And if you don't even like the idea of a personal God, you can use that kind of idea to see that you're not the doer. It's the sunshine that's doing it through you. Everything you do is being run on canned sunlight. But usually it's easier to think of a personal God and think that you are the instrument of this personal God, and you try to do everything the best you can and be the best instrument that you can. All right.
And the cause of the mistake here, as everywhere else, is ignorance. Now, how and when this has begun, nobody can say. And any attempt to know its origin is futile, so long as one is in ignorance. Dreams appear as true as long as you're dreaming. Only when compared with the waking state, after the sleep is broken, do they appear as false. Well, there may be some stray instances when people realize, even in dreams, that they are dreaming. But even that consciousness is due to the lingering memory of the waking state. And instances are not wanting to show that at times there lingers the memory of the highest consciousness, of the one indivisible Brahman as experienced at Samadhi, even while one is perceiving the manifold universe in the waking state.
And let's see, does he point out lucid dreaming somewhere? Did he? Yeah, he does kind of allude to that. It was interesting. I met somebody that was a devotee here. He's moved away, but he said that he had always had lucid dreams ever since he was born, ever since he could remember remembering dreams, that he'd had lucid dreams and didn't realize everybody didn't have lucid dreams all the time. So that was very interesting to see that for most people it's not a very common experience. But in lucid dreams you realize that you're the dreamer even while you're still in the dream state. So, this is the idea of how to understand this reality, is that it seems real now, but after you've become enlightened, then it doesn't seem as real as it does now, just like your dream. Your dream, you had a real dream, so it's not like the dream is a complete fiction. It was a real dream, but it doesn't have the reality that you thought it did. And you realize that when you wake up. So that's the interesting comparison between the dream state and the waking state, and the waking state and the superconscious state. Okay.
Drive out the ignorance, and the truth will be revealed unto you. The sages of yore realized the truth and have shown us the way how to get rid of nescience. But still another doubt arises in the mind. What guarantee is there that the experience of the sages, who form a microscopic minority, is true, while the sensuous perceptions of the universe by all men are false? On the contrary, can it not be a fact that those whom you call sages are really deluded?
And of course, we've probably, if you've been listening to these classes for a while, you realize that our sense organs really aren't all that reliable. And even our sharing of experiences shows that we experience things differently. You can taste a particular type of food and you might think it's quite delicious, and the next person might think it's kind of yucky. Maybe they don't like the texture or they don't like the taste. You can be looking at colors and one person says, well, this is a pretty shade of green, and someone else says it's not green at all, it's blue. So these differences in our perception occur all the time. And so to think that just because something is a sense perception, that it's real, really is not a very accurate statement. Our sense perceptions are just what our particular sense organs deliver to our brain, and our brain processes it in conjunction with our memory of previous things and our experiences. And of course, we also know that different cultures have different experiences of things. For example, Eskimos have many, many names for ice, and they've distinguished between all sorts of different kinds of ice that most of us have no use for. We don't have any use to distinguish that many kinds of ice, and we don't have words for them, and our perception of those things is lacking. We wouldn't be able to even notice those different kinds of ice. And as a flower fancier, I raise hybridized camellias and iris and various things. Most people don't see the details. They don't see the slight variations in the kind of leaf structure, the veination, and the little teeth mark the edges of the serrations at the ends of the leaves and so forth. And so when you're looking at flowers and plants and so forth, depending on your training, you see more or less details. So that's one thing. Now, of course, the trouble with spiritual life is that it is a subjective experience, and we are relying on the experiences of saints and sages, which many times are beyond our understanding, and they all also are going to differ in their explanations of their experiences depending on their backgrounds and their culture and the times that they lived. And so you don't find absolute identity in descriptions of things in every single scripture, because those people lived at different times and they were talking to different kinds of people. All right, let's go on.
Well, truth is not to be judged by the opinions of the majority or the minority. Experience of the sages is accepted as true, for by that experience they were able to free themselves from all kinds of miseries, to become fearless and acquire eternal peace and blessedness. Moreover, they had thereby found out the secret purpose of all the struggles of mortal human life. Further, real knowledge gives a wonderful catholicity to man, endowing him with all the excellences of the head and the heart, such as patience, contentment, kindness, humility, and so on. From the Shastras we learn that these sages attained such graces in their own lives, and even now we find that those who follow in their footsteps and attain the supreme knowledge also get these qualities.
Yes, and if you're properly attuned to these things and you meet somebody that is a highly realized soul, you will see those qualities. If you're not looking for them and you're not attuned to them, you could meet a very saintly person and it wouldn't make an impact on you. And of course, we have the example of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and all the different direct disciples. And many people might have run into Sri Ramakrishna at some point or other, and it just didn't strike them. They weren't interested. It wasn't something they were looking for. And so they just thought he was kind of a strange, crazy priest guy who did strange stuff. And they didn't see his true spiritual nature. So the student has to be ready for the experience in order for them to appreciate the spiritual qualities. But if you're looking for a spiritual teacher and you're looking for people with spiritual qualities, and you're lucky enough to meet somebody that has had samadhi, you realize that there's something different about this person, that they are truly different from the rest of us, and they have a certain freedom about them that most of us don't have. All right.
Again, the question may arise here, how can error be common and universal? The object that you or I experience as the cow is so experienced by all. Nobody ever mistakes a cow for a man. It is not a little wonder, then, that all people commit the same mistake, and that at the same time. Our experience tells us that though a few may be wrong, yet there would be others who see the reality. But here we find an exception to that general rule. How is it? Well, you see the exception because you are not counting the sages in the category of men. The sages do not see the object as cow, but they see God instead. But as to the question why all make the same mistake, the scriptures reply, there is a universal mind, Sutratma, in which arise the diverse images of the various objects of the universe. And as the individual minds form part and parcel of that one universal mind, they share the common experience of the universal. Hence, the knowledge of external objects does not depend on our individual and subjective ideas, but it is due to the conception of the cosmic mind. And therefore, we cannot see a cow as other than a cow. Again, for the same reason, even when some get emancipated from the thraldom of nescience, others remain still subject to the chimerical visions of the universe. But we must remember that though the universal soul in his cosmic mind has got the idea of the universe, he is not immersed in ignorance like ourselves, simply for the reason that he, being the omniscient Lord, has the knowledge of the existence of one impartite Brahman in and through the manifold universe. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the snake has poison in its fangs, but it's none the worse for it. The poison does not affect it because the snake's death, although its bite, does kill others.
Yeah, it's a cosmic illusion. It's not an individual mistake. It's a cosmic mistake. We're all part of that cosmic mistake. There's really only one of us here. We think of ourselves as individuals and that they're all separate, but that's part of the illusion. And so the reason we all see the same mistake, so to say, is because we're all part of that cosmic illusion. We're all part of that cosmic mind, and we're all thinking we're individuals. Just like if you're the creator of a movie or a screenplay or a novel, you create all those characters out of your mind, and they all interact with each other, and they all act as individuals, and they all have their own desires and their own motives and so forth. But they all came out of you. So similarly, we've all come out of the cosmic mind, and we've been, the veil of ignorance has been pulled over our eyes so that we think that we are truly individuals and acting as individuals and not part of this whole cosmic drama. All right.
Thus we come to learn from the scriptures that the universe does not exist in reality apart from an idea in the cosmic mind. And it can also be said that the universe remains only as idea in the individual minds too. For the cosmic mind is an organic whole, and the individual minds are eternally connected with it, even as the limbs are connected to the body. It cannot be affirmed that the idea of the universe did not exist before, but entered there at some particular time. For what we call time and space, or name and form, without which no idea of differentiation is possible, are ideas eternally connected with the idea of the universe. In other words, the ideas of time and space cannot be separated from the idea of the universe and the cosmic mind. Therefore, the Vedas and other Hindu scriptures have declared that Prakriti, or Maya, which causes this universe, is beginningless and beyond time. And the individual minds, as conditioned by this Maya from a beginningless time, have developed the notion of permanent reality about this world idea. And similarly, having been deprived of the vision of the real, the one Brahman, from a beginningless time, they have become unable to detect the error in this experience of this world vision, and thus get rid of this delusion. For as already stated, error is found out only when we come to know the truth.
You know, in quantum mechanics, the ideas in quantum mechanics depend on an observer to collapse the wave probability function. And so the problem arose in many people's mind, well, what if two different people decide to collapse the wave function differently? And Schrödinger replied, there is no objective evidence for the plurality of the observer. So we have a scientist that's also stating that there's really only one subject. Each of us thinks of us as a subject and everything else is an object, but there's only one subject. If we want quantum mechanics to work, there can only be one subject here. So that's one of the peculiar things in quantum mechanics, is that they're coming up with these things that jibe with Hindu beliefs over and over again. So let's see if there's something else. Oh, yeah, I was talking to a college, or not a college class, a high school class today, and the subject of the deities came up, and why do they all look like Hindus? You know, they don't look Japanese or African or European. And my answer is that it's because we're all part of this cosmic mind, and there's sort of, as Jung would put it, a collective unconscious. And so if an entire group of people in a particular area decide that God is going to look this way, God's perfectly happy to oblige. God has no problem with that. God is the infinite, undivided, unchanging reality, and it can take any kind of form it likes to. And so the collective unconscious co-creates the deities. That's my particular way of putting it. So they are co-created to please the devotees. That was my particular answer. Don't know if it's right or not, but that's just the way I see it. Okay.
Thus we see, if we want to know the truth of this universe, we must get beyond this universe of name and form, beyond all time, space, and causation, beyond all ideas and ideation, and have the blessed vision of that transcendental reality. The preparation and the struggle to attain to the realization of that reality are known in the Vedas and other scriptures as sadhana. And he in whom the struggle exists, whether consciously or unconsciously, is known in India as a sadhika.
And of course that word transcendental is key here. You can't expect these things to be noticed by the senses because they are transcendental. They transcend the senses. And so that's the difficulty. And it's the difficulty with all these ideas about what consciousness is and what is it the basis of everything, or is it an epiphenomenon of matter? And all the various experiences that people have that consciousness is primary are subjective, and they're not shareable with other people through the senses. So that's the main problem with trying to demonstrate that type of thing. All right, let's continue, see what he's going to say about sadhana.
Generally speaking, that struggle to know the transcendental reality has for long taken two courses. The first one, known in the Shastras as the process of not this, is the path of knowledge, jnana, which seems to attain the goal by negating the unreal. The other one, the process of this, is the path of bhakti. The sadhaka of the path of knowledge is from the very beginning fully aware of the consummation of his path and tries to approximate to it by constant meditation upon the goal. While those who take to the path of devotion, bhakti, are in most cases ignorant of the highest end in the beginning, but ultimately realize the same transcendent being by advancing step by step from one ideal to another. But in either case, the angle of vision is changed, and both have to renounce the feverish attachment for the world. With the jnani, the renunciation of everything commences from the very start. Well, the bhakti begins by giving up little by little for the sake of his beloved, but finally ends in realizing the same reality, the one without a second, by renouncing all like the jnani. The scriptures define vairagya as the renunciation of that outlook of the world which is defiled by selfishness and sense enjoyment.
Yeah, and that's there's another way to look at this as opposed to just the bhakti path, but also as the vijnani. So once you've decided that this is not real, this is not real, this is not Brahman, all of these things are ephemeral and transient and so forth, and you want to go after the infinite, undivided, unchanging reality, and you realize Brahman, then the vijnani state is where you realize that all of those things that were impermanent also came out of Brahman. They were part of Brahman, even though they were temporary and impermanent. They still came out of Brahman, so everything is this. And so, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you go up the stairs and you realize that each stair is not the roof. This is not the roof. The next stair is not the roof. The next stair is not the roof. And you finally get to the roof and it's made out of cement, and then you realize the whole set of stairs was made out of cement. And so that was his analogy there of realizing the vijnani state. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter, it also describes how one has to cut yourself off from the ego sense in the world in order to realize Brahman. And it was interesting to read different commentaries on the 15th chapter, depending on the commentator's particular viewpoint and favorite yoga. Some of them emphasized this idea of selflessness, and others emphasized the idea of giving up sense enjoyments, and others emphasized a path of bhakti and devoting everything to God, and doing that as a way that's easier to give things up. It was described that if you become attached to God, it's easier to give up other things. So, like when you're growing up, you have to give up your old toys in order to start playing with your new toys. You don't have time to play with all your old toys anymore. And so, while you may not have had to forcibly give up any particular toy, pretty soon you find that when you're several years older, the toys that you were enjoying back then, you've lost them in the bottom of your closet somewhere. You don't even know where they are, because you've gotten better toys and more fun toys to play with. So you have to make the Lord your current fascination and attachment, and you become attached to God. And then the other things become, you gradually just forget about them, and you don't feel that attachment to them anymore. All right.
Very easily arises the knowledge of the transcendency of the world. When we begin to ponder over this ever-changing human life that ultimately ends in death, it seems, therefore, more possible that in ancient ages man found out the reality, the first cause, first through the path of knowledge, by renouncing the popular view of the world and life that makes one forget the reality. And for the same reason, we find in the Upanishads that the highest development of the philosophy of jnana was already arrived at even before the full development of the different aspects of bhakti was attained, though it is true that from the very beginning, these two paths were in vogue. We have ample evidence in the Upanishads of the fact that man soon became introspective as he proceeded with the analytical process of negation, the not this process, in his search after the eternal first cause. He soon realized that more than any of the external objects, his own body and mind are instrumental in getting him tagged on to the phenomenal world, and that if properly directed, they would help him more in finding out the first cause than all other external aids. By examining a single grain in a rice pot, one can tell if the whole quantity is well boiled or not. Similarly, if one can find out the eternal being within one's own self, one can see him in all. Thus, to a pursuer of the path of knowledge, the only aim and ideal is to know the reality in him.
Yeah, so the idea, again, is that our body-mind complex is endowed with these 5 sense organs, which then go out and interact with the universe out there, and they find all sorts of things that are quite fascinating. But the only trouble is there's a mixture of pleasant and painful, of good and evil, of every time you find one pair of opposite, you get part of the other pair of opposite. But the sense organs, you see, are designed to sense these 5 energies of Brahman, and those 5 energies of Brahman have manifested as this universe. And so we're endowed with these 5 sense organs that go out there and enjoy all these different energies of Brahman. But if you want to really know the peace and bliss that's behind that, connect to the ultimate Brahman, the unchanging aspect of Brahman, that's not endowed with pairs of opposites from the sense organs, then you need to do these sadhanas in order to lessen your ego sense, to lessen your attachment to sense objects, and so forth. All right.
It has been already told, be one a jnani or a bhakta. One has to give up one's attachment to the world. When this renunciation becomes complete, the mind becomes free from all thought waves and attains samadhi. The kind of samadhi, this kind is called the nirvikalpa samadhi in the scriptures. The bhakta, though, he perceives the transcendency of the world, believes in a personal God, and therefore in the reality of the phenomenal world, his creation. All persons and objects are dear to him, as he finds them all connected with God. He renounces all those objects that blur his vision of the beloved. His only aim and ideal is to merge himself in the love and thought of some particular aspect of God, and when that is attained, his whole life becomes an oblation on the altar of love for the Lord.
And of course, you can approach these things in various ways. You can try to orient anything that you're doing or anything you run across to your spiritual practice and to your personal deity, your personal ishta, or chosen ideal. And so if you're in some sort of service occupation, then you see the Lord in the people that you're serving. And so by serving them, you're serving your personal deity. You can, if you have something that you enjoy doing, suppose you enjoy music or singing, well, then you can sing spiritual songs. If you enjoy writing, you can write about spiritual topics. So there are a lot of things that you connect to your spiritual practice. And as we said, the more that you connect these things to your spiritual practice, the less interested in other things you will become. And let's see, I was going to say something else and it slipped out of my head. So maybe it'll come back to me after you read something.
Now let us see how a bhakta loses himself in the one thought of his beloved and forgets the existence of the outside world and ultimately reaches the state of nirvikalpa. As has been already hinted, the bhakta accepts one particular form of God as his chosen ideal and begins to think and meditate on that alone. In the beginning, he fails to bring before his mind's eye in meditation the complete form of his chosen ideal. But as he proceeds on with his practice of meditation, his mind gets more and more concentrated, and his mental image of God also becomes more and more vivid and steady. and subsequently in a profounder state of meditation, the image becomes living, and it becomes possible for the devotee even to feel its divine touch and hold talks with it. At this stage, whether with eyes open or closed, the least concentration makes the devotee feel the living presence of his Lord. Then again, from the belief that it is his Lord who assumed all the different forms, the devout sadhaka perceives the emanation of various other divine forms from his own chosen ideal, Ishta. Ramakrishna used to say, "To him who is blessed with the vision of one such living divine form, the vision of other forms of God come easily of themselves."
Yeah, well, I remember what it was I was going to say, and that's the other way of sadhana. Rather than attaching each thing that you do to the Lord, is to become detached from it. If you can't attach it to some aspect of your spiritual practice and your personal chosen ideal, then you have to practice detachment from it. And really everything, even the things that you do attach to your spiritual practice, you have to realize eventually is going to come to an end at some point. All of your particular friends, your spouse, your even sometimes your children, and certainly your parents, many times predecease you. Your occupation may change, your job may suddenly disappear through AI or whatever. And so you just simply have to be prepared for that. You can't be so attached to it that you simply give up. And I've seen that happen to people. They have their heart set on becoming a particular occupation, and something gets in the way of them doing that, and then they just give up. There aren't any other options for them. They just quit, and they just kind of become a bum, basically. They don't do anything constructive. And so that's not spiritual life. Spiritual life isn't just deciding you're not going to do anything. So you need to use the talents that you're given in the best way possible. Then let's see, there's something in this new one that I was going to say. Oh, yes. It's interesting how all the different traditions within Hinduism, for the most part, most of them connect other deities to the primary deity in their own way. So if you're a Vaishnava, it might be Krishna or Rama that's your primary focus of attention. But then you read stories about how Rama would worship Shiva, or he would call on the Divine Mother for help, and so forth. And so you've connected them with those two great traditions. And if likewise, in the stories of the Chandi, you find involvement of Brahma and Vishnu in some of the epics. So each tradition will include the deities from the other main traditions as part of their narrative, but they put theirs on top. So that's just the way it goes. And Hinduism doesn't have a problem with that. I liken it to being on several different mountain peaks. There are several different mountain peaks, and they're all exactly the same height. The one you're on looks highest. The others look shorter. So if you're a part of a particular tradition, or you have a particular chosen ideal, you're on that mountain, and that one looks taller, and the others look like they're a little bit less. So that's perfectly natural, and we don't have a problem with that. Oh, we're just coming here to the we almost made it through this, didn't quite make it, but we can continue next week.
You might want to tell people where they can get the book.
Oh, yeah. Of course, it's available in the Vedanta bookshop. It's also available at Vedanta catalog, which is vedanta.com. And you can also get it on Kindle. So you've got several ways of getting this little book. It's a collection of essays by the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om peace, peace, peace. Be off the air.